Hello and welcome back to Geek and Speak, the Geek and Seek podcast. Oh my gosh, guys, it has been a while since we've done one of these. We've had our podcast since the beginning of the channel back in I don't know what it was, Preston, if you remember, but probably summer of 2019 or something since we started this channel. Yeah, we've had this podcast for a long time and it's kind of come and gone, and we have new vision for it. We have a new plan that we think is going to work, and we have the passion and the know-how and the brains and the people and the manpower to finally make it happen. Yeah, this is our first episode since February where we did a top 10, Steve and I, for Phyrexia All Will Be One. That was the last video we did. That's crazy that it's been that long. But today we have a very fun topic. We are talking, kind of asking the question, are Precons worth it? Commander Precons, are they worth it? And we're going to talk a little bit about why that's a question worth discussing and have some data to back that up. But joining me today, well, first of all, hi, I'm Morgan. It's been a while since I've done one of these. Hi, I'm Morgan. And today with me, I have my good pal, Preston. Preston, how's it going?
Pretty good. Past couple days have been uneventful for me, which is better than being eventful in bad ways, so I can't be complaining too much.
That's for sure. And then I also have my good pal, Jason. Jason, how's it going, man?
Oh, it's been a pretty good week for me so far. Granted, it's only Friday, and really the good part of my week started on Thursday. For any of you football fans out there, yeah, we kind of did a thing on Thursday. If you know, you know. So
which is
pretty good.
Yeah, sports ball. It's also funny because we live in the part of the world where everyone's a Kansas City Chiefs fan. So I think Jason's just trying to be edgy. But
Oh no! It's not edge. It's not edge. This is I live and
talent.
breathe.
Yeah.
I live and breathe this right here, brother. This is in my veins.
He's just a furry.
Well, that's something else. That has nothing to do with this.
And I guess what's going on in my life? I have a really cool job opportunity that I don't want to say too much right now because it's still kind of developing, but it has kind of to do with magic. So you guys will want to know about it once it's better solidified, because I think you'll think it's cool. So we will get, I'll share more with that as we go. So a couple things before we get into the main topic. Our new timeline for the podcast is now going to be every other week. I believe this episode is coming out September 20th, I believe is right. And from there, we will be every other week. We will have a new episode. And part of how that's possible with upkeep going on and that draining my soul is that Jason here has taken up the mantle of he's going to be the new podcast editor. So give him a quick round of applause and leave nice things in the comments. But Jason, are you ready for the challenge? Are you ready for the task at hand?
Oh yeah, it's going to be very difficult and extremely hard to edit this whole podcast. I honestly don't think it'll be that difficult. I'm excited to get more into future episodes of Upkeep and End Step and doing things like that. But I think
he's also helping out with End Step. I think the one that just came out, he did, and he's gonna get some stuff off of my plate, and he's gonna, as he gets better, take on more and more editing, and that's gonna help Geek and Seek keep making a bunch of content.
I'm just excited to help the channel grow as much as possible, and I appreciate everybody out there who watches these videos, because we all try our best in the games and everything to make it interesting and keep everyone wanting to come back and watch more games. So we appreciate everybody who sticks with it.
Yeah, for sure. Real quick, we used to do Q&As at the end of our podcast. We used to just do a ask out on all of our social media, on our Facebook, our Instagram. I think I'm going to bring our Twitter back. I know it's not called Twitter anymore, but I don't want to call it X because that sounds dumb. Because you can't call it a tweet anymore. You call it an X. I don't want to talk to my exes.
It sounds like an adult film website.
Yeah, it doesn't
we're
sound
gonna
right.
stick
but
with Twitter.
Yeah, I'm going to keep calling it Twitter, even though that's not actually what it's called. I'm thinking about getting the Geek and Seek Twitter going again. But we'll rally up any questions you guys have, and at the end of the episode, we will get around to answering those. And if you are a Patreon and you are in our Discord, we also have a questions tab there. You can leave questions there. And if you're here, you're watching this on YouTube, you could also just drop a comment and ask a question there. And assuming we have a couple of questions to answer, we'll do that at the end of all of the episodes, except for this one, because we obviously don't have any questions to answer. We might start putting this also on Spotify for the podcast, but our main stuff is going on YouTube. So, anything you can do to help us out in the algorithm, that is pretty cash money, as the kids would say. So as far as Magic news, that's also something we would like to start doing in our podcast, is like if there's anything newsworthy in the world of Magic, get that out of the way before we get into our main topic. Two things. Very recently, we had the official paper release of Wilds of Eldraine, and the Wilds of Eldraine episode of Upkeep is the newest episode, I believe, still at the time that this is coming out to you guys. And then also, like 2 days after this video comes out, I'm leaving for MagicCon Vegas. I hope to see you guys there. I would love to get to play some games with you guys, and I'm going to be hanging out and all that good stuff. So, let us know in the comments as well if you're going to hang out with me at MagicCon Vegas, or what you guys are thinking of Wilds of Eldraine. What do you guys, Preston and Jason, what do you guys think of Wilds of Eldraine?
I like it. Not my favorite set of all time, but I think it's a much better set than the original Eldraine.
I think it's really interesting that they added instants and sorceries into the command zone like this.
Yes.
We've had similar things in the past with, the modal dual face cards, but Preston's commander that he played in that episode of Upkeep, it's such a cool commander to build around. And, I said this in End Step. I love Eldraine. I love that plane a lot. I'm glad that we came back.
Yeah. This is a lot more tame. It's fun. And it's fun like original Eldraine, but there's nothing like inherently broken like half the cards were in Eldraine, in original, that is. And the other thing about Preston's deck is I think and I don't think this is much of a spoiler, but it did pretty mediocre in the game. And I think overall his deck is mediocre, but because we will get more adventures as time goes on, I think that's a deck that if he keeps that shell together over time, it's actually going to become a really good, really cool deck. Yeah. All right. So that actually is a decent segue into our main topic, which is Precons. Is it worth it to buy them? And other things and questions concerning Commander Precons. So, one of the things that made me want to do this video, well, two things. One was the outrageous pricing for Commander Masters Precons. That was crazy. And then we also had a lot of long games. I know for you guys, when you guys watch Upkeep, the episodes don't look that long because I cut out all the dead air and weird things where people get confused about interactions or when people are assessing the board state. I cut all that stuff out. So you guys are only seeing about a quarter of the actual game, even in that 30-40 minute video. So if you guys remember, the longest game, or it was the second longest game in season 1 of Upkeep, was the Warhammer episode, which we were all playing non-upgraded Precon. So that game was about an hour and 42 minutes. And then the last 3 episodes of Upkeep have all been crazy long. Commander Masters, 2 hours and 20 minutes. Lord of the Rings, 2 hours and 30 minutes. Wilds of Eldraine, almost 2 hours. This was about an hour, 50 minutes. So what do you guys think about this statistic? Because in all of these, we are either playing Precons or barely upgraded Precons, at least some of us. Less so in the Wilds of Eldraine. I guess only 2 of you guys were playing slightly upgraded Precons, and the other 2 were building decks from scratch. But my analysis on that is that Precons, and I don't know if this is a power level thing, I don't know if this is a card advantage thing, I'd like to get what your guys' thoughts are, but I feel like Precons slow down the game. What do you guys think about that?
There might be a couple exceptions, but for the most part, yeah, that's probably a pretty fair thing to say on average.
And what do you think that is? Do you think it's a lack of good card advantage to find answers? Do you think there's not enough answers in the decks at all? Or is it like in the Lord of the Rings episode where there were like 9 board wipes? Do they have too much interaction? Like, what do you think? What about precons leads to long games? Do you guys think?
Well, I think it's changed over the years from the old ones to the new ones. The old ones didn't have nearly enough of most of that kind of stuff a lot of the times. So games would sort of just be spinning out forever as people hope to top deck something to finally change the board state. And with new precons, everyone's actually has card draw, a lot of answers. They're better built decks nowadays than they used to be, so they're able to compete more, but they're new cards, so people have to learn the deck each time they get a new precon.
The way that I see it, I think that precons, when they first started to get released, it was like intended to be something that you take apart and add pieces to, change it in some way, or take cards out of it to put in a new deck. You know, it wasn't necessarily meant to be incredibly viable, even for like a casual game. But
I think they might have actually been meant to be kept the way they were to play against each other, which is why they were always coming out in a full set of 4 or 5.
Right. But I mean, not just playing against each other like that. I mean, after it's released and people have had the opportunities to play them the way that you're supposed to be played, because obviously that's why the precons are made, and we're talking about the cards that get put in them. I think that the cards that are in them are replaceable in a majority of situations. Be that there are just better options for less mana. They don't synergize very well with a lot of other things in the deck. There's just a lot of very cuttable pieces. And I think that was intentional, so that after you play against all the other precons and you want to take it apart and add things to it and change it a little bit, that was really more of the focus on the design. Like, yes, they wanted them to play against each other, but I really feel like that the focus on the design at the time was more, let's make these decks that people can turn into like lifelong commander decks that they play forever.
It's been a long time since he's done an episode, but Gavin Verhey on his YouTube channel had a podcast where they were going through the history of commander precons. And one of the things that he mentioned in the first episode is that that's true. They were designing decks to be upgradable. They wanted you to pick up a deck, and part of that was because, like, the backup commanders, and they still kind of do this. The backup commanders were either a similar synergy or basically the same synergy, but they require different pieces to work. So the idea was you would pick which commander you liked, and then depending on which one you liked, you would have to make changes to the deck in order to make it more functional. So that was very intentional. But the other thing that's kind of awkward about those is that it's less so now, but especially in the early days, they didn't really have opportunities to print multiplayer cards because back then it was mostly, I think Modern Masters maybe was a thing back then, but really it was just the standard sets. So it was their opportunity to make new multiplayer cards. And so as a side effect of that, a lot of the precons had cards in them that were like, oh, here's a green card that affects all players at the table, even if it has no actual synergy with the deck. But that was just their way that they could get more multiplayer oriented cards out into the wild.
And it was only one a year in the beginning.
Right, yeah.
So they had to put a lot more of those kinds of cards into these decks because, you know, if you only get a select amount of precons coming out every year, you don't have as many opportunities to get new cards out. So you kind of got to shove as many in as possible, which is another reason why I think that the decks have like gotten a bit better over the years, is because they're kind of making it so that you can just pull this deck like out of the box, sleeve it up, and then keep it, maybe change one or two things with like the mana base. But I really feel like that they have. I think that at this point, with as many precons that has come out, like, I mean, how many has there been? There has to have been like
a million
at least.
I don't know.
A bunch since when was the first one? 2016.
I believe 2011.
So 2011. Yeah,
that's
right. That's right. So it's got to be like close to 100 at this point, right?
So I feel like we're doing a very good job analyzing the history of Commander Precons, but I guess my question or my concern is, are they still that way? Because like I said, we've had some really long games of upkeep. Even though it doesn't look like it to you guys, the viewers, we've had some very long games of upkeep, and I feel like a big part of it is because of playing with precons.
Well, here's my thing. I think that the games are lasting longer because the precons are constructed well enough that they almost synergize well together. Like, they all have good answers for something that one of the decks is doing, or multiple of the decks is doing. And then, they have classic cards in Magic or staples that just affect specific things that you need to affect. But I think the decks are really built around synergy more, and as far as like just getting as many cards out there as possible that you could potentially replace and upgrade the deck. I think the decks are now built to be able to like go up against the deck that somebody has built and played for years.
So we've talked a little bit about power level at this point, and I think we're all in agreement that, with exceptions, there are definitely exceptions, but in general, the construction is pretty good on precons, and the power does seem to, in a general sense, go up over time. There are a couple outliers. Like, I still think the Edgar Markov precon is bonkers, even though it's 6 years old or whatever. There are definitely some older precons that I think could still do okay in a game today. And there's definitely some more recent precons that, like the Mishra precon from last year, it was really cool. It wasn't very good. So I think with some exceptions, but for the most part, are we all in agreement that in general, precon power level is keeping up with the format?
Well, there's one thing about the precons now that I think is weaker than they used to be, and that's new commanders. They tend to tone those down a lot, but they've made the actual 99 a lot stronger. But around 2017, when those Edgar Markov ones were coming out, is when they started switching those out.
The Eminence commanders, that was kind of bonkers.
Yeah, those were strong decks and strong commanders.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the majority of them keep up pretty well. They're obviously the outliers, but I can't remember the name of the commander. The Golgari Elves.
Lathril.
That's a good precon.
That's a good precon. Yeah.
That's a really good precon. That deck would go up against a lot of like constructed decks. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. So we've also talked a little bit about mana bases, and we've talked a little bit about upgrades. But even though Wizards of the Coast is designing precons with the idea that you're going to pick a commander and roll with it, and that's going to mean you're going to have to make some changes to the deck, do we really want to upgrade the land base? Like, that's definitely like the least exciting part. Now, I understand that they have to be careful about where they reprint things in order to maximize their profits, because I know that they're a business and businesses have to make money. Otherwise, they can't keep making the game. So I don't expect them to put like fetch lands and shock lands in there. But think about like the Battle Bond lands, like they are in a couple of the precons, like Rejuvenating Springs was in the Elf precon in Lord of the Rings. So they do sometimes show up in precons. But the Battle Bond lands were designed for multiplayer. So why are they not in every precon? And then like another decent example is like the Pain lands, the ones that come in untapped, they tap for colorless, or they can tap for one of two colors, but they deal 1 damage to you. Those are great lands, especially in 2-color decks, maybe some other decks that have more colors. We don't really see those in precons either. And I don't understand why. Now, luckily, they got reprinted in Standard recently, so most of them are cheap. Like I think the most expensive one is like $5 or something like that. But still, like, what are our thoughts on the land bases? And when you pick up a Precon, you have to accept the fact that a lot of your money and resources and time that you're going to be spending upgrading that deck is going to have to go into the land base upgrading. Because I also just recently had a video. It's not out at the as of the filming of this, but by the time this episode comes out, I did a review of the 2 Wilds of Eldraine Precons. Both of those Precons have 39 lands in them, which is a lot. The fairy one had 23 basics, and the red and the aura one had 25 basics. That's a lot of basics, and that's a lot of lands, and that's going to that makes upgrading the deck boring, if you ask me. But what do you guys think? Do you think that that just is what it is, or do you think that this is kind of getting ridiculous and Wizards needs to start actually putting decent lands in these Precons in order to make them worth it?
They could definitely make the land base better. Like you said, they don't have to put every single good land for the color combination in, but basically every Precon could have an easy $10-15 cut out of the necessary upgrades by just adding a few different lands in.
Right.
I mean, no question, the mana base could always be better in these, and I don't think any of us are expecting anything like 2 or 3 battle bond lands in every Precon. Just maybe one. Just one of those.
Sure. Or like maybe every 3-color deck should have a Triome, or something like that. Because the Triomes are going to be like $10.
There's no reason that a Triome should be that expensive. It comes in tapped. It taps for 3 lands. So what?
But it's fetchable, which also doesn't matter because the average Commander player can't afford fetch lands, so it doesn't matter.
You're right. But there are also, are there not, what were those, oh my gosh, new Capenna lands, the ones that, when they come in.
The ones that are Triomes that aren't called Triomes just to make me mad.
Yeah.
Yeah, those.
And they don't even have their own name. They're all something different.
No.
We could dedicate a whole episode just to how mad that makes me. It's just the small things that irk me.
I would even be okay with seeing like the gain life lands and the scry lands. I would be okay with seeing those in decks that are kind of built around scrying or gaining life. Something like that.
Well, like in the Frodo deck from Lord of the Rings, it has the enter the battlefield tapped, gain a life lands, and I think you don't really ever want to play those outside of 2-color decks on a budget. However, it's a life gain deck, so I'm not mad about it either.
Exactly, it's a life gain deck. The land helps synergize with the rest of the deck. If I could play a land and just me playing a land causes something else to happen, that's really good for me because I want to play lands anyways.
Right. So I guess what are some good options? Like if Wizards somehow was listening to this and they were like, you know what, these guys are right. What are the best options for getting more value into the land base? Because we know that they're not going to do shock lands. We know they're not going to do fetch lands. And those are like my top 2 picks. My next pick, though, is all 3-color decks should have the Triome.
I agree with that.
What would your top pick be? Would it be that, or what's a good like 2-color land that they should be putting? Is it the Battle Bond ones? Is there another one that
those are probably my main one I'd want?
The Battle Bond ones?
Because they're commander lands.
Yeah.
I know that set was 2-headed giant, but they were clearly designed for commander.
Yeah,
the Innistrad lands.
Awesome.
The Innistrad
which
lands.
Ones? Oh yeah,
the Midnight Hunt and Crimson Vow. Those lands, the ones that if you have 2 or more other lands,
those ones are also really good.
Yeah, and they're also starting to go up in price. There's a couple that were in like those Pioneer and or Standard Precons that they did, and those are like pretty cheap. You can get those for like $2 a piece or something. But a lot of the other ones are like $8, and I think they're only that cheap still because they're still standard legal. and they're still probably like the print run's not over. And I think once the print run's over, we're going to need to find a option to reprint them. Otherwise, we're going to have a problem. And because those are really good lands. They are really good. I put them in most of my decks. Like, I think all 2 and 3 color decks, I have them in there. So, the next thing that I want to... I'll wait for Jason. You didn't miss anything. So the next thing I wanted to go over is value, because that's a big topic. A big factor if you're going to be talking about, is it worth it to get something? You have to be at least kind of thinking about value. So I wrote down, this is going to vary a little bit, but from least expensive to most expensive, we used to have set-specific commander decks that they had fewer new cards in them. Like they would only have 2 or 3 new cards, and that was it. And the rest were just reprints. These were very short-lived, but they brought us some bangers, and those were $20. We also have intro commander decks, which they've only done once so far, I believe, and those were also $20. And I do think in general those decks are on the lower power level, but they were okay. They were playable. And then we have the normal ones, which is kind of what we come to expect. This is the $40 to $45 range. These are like when they were doing I mean, they were probably less than $40 when they first started, but you know, when they were doing the once a year commander decks, and now they're doing them a couple every set, and then one big one in the middle of the year or something. Those are the 40 to 45. And now we have Universes Beyond. And these are like somewhere in the $50 to $60 range. This varies a lot. And part of that's just because of, I guess, product distribution. I'm not sure what the factor is, but these vary a lot in value. And then up there, we also have, I guess I didn't write this down, but we also have like, there have been a couple secret layer commander decks that have been like $100, $150, but you know, I wasn't going to count those. Those are weird. Yeah. I think in general, those are a cool idea, but I wasn't going to count them. But then last of all, we have our Commander Masters Precons, which I do really like those Precons, guys. You know, I like those Precons, but $80 for them. That's a lot, you know?
I mean, did any one of them have a dock side in it?
No.
Why am I paying $80 for a Precon then?
No one has the answer to that question, Jason. So I guess the question I want to propose to the cast here is, what would make you willing to spend more or less on a commander deck? If we have accepted that a new Precon is somewhere in the ballpark of probably about $40, what needs to change in order for you to be like, or what do you think is the place of a $20 or a cheaper Precon? But then also, if there's going to be the more expensive ones, what do you think justifies that, if anything?
Better land base. I mean, I'm serious. I would pay more money. I would pay more than $40 for a pre-constructed commander deck if it had a good land base. If I could look at the deck list and say, what, it has this dual land that enters untapped under this circumstance, and this one, and this one, and this one, I would do that 100%.
Yeah, honestly, if there was a mediocre Precon, like a mediocre theme or something, but it had like the perfectly optimized land base, other than OG duels, because I know they can't reprint them because of the reserved list. But other than that, if it had like the perfectly optimized land base, I would pay $100 for it. I seriously would. I would, just because like when I buy a Precon, that's what I'm putting my money towards. Is like there's like I take the 4 or 5 like obviously bad cards out and put new ones in, and then I spend $100 upgrading the land base. So I would totally spend more money on one with a better land base. Are there other like situations, or is it mostly lands?
Obviously, other notable reprints of expensive cards help.
Yeah. I actually don't
like
mind
staples that need reprints.
Yeah, like Dockside needs it more than it gets. I actually am okay with spending more for Universes Beyond. Universes Beyond, we're going to have an episode about that in the semi-near future. Around when Doctor Who comes out, we'll have an episode talking about Universes Beyond. But generally speaking, I'm okay with spending more money on Universes Beyond because there's a lot of cool new cards that I'm willing to just try to get my hands on and test them out. But also in the average Precon, they're not getting new art. They are just reprinting cards. Whereas Universes Beyond, even the reprints get new art. And to me, I'm not that big into collecting art or anything like that, but it's still cool. Like to say, here is my Lion War elves, except it's from Lord of the Rings.
Lord of the Rings.
Yeah. I think that's pretty cool. I think that's, especially if it's a franchise you really like, I think that's a time where maybe spending a little more is worth it. And maybe that's a case-by-case basis. Maybe not everyone would agree with that, but...
Jeez. I was trying to figure out prices of the fetch lands now, just to see how much, like, how viable, or how likely it would be that Magic, the Wizards of the Coast, could put them in a few Precons every year, and the prices are already at, like, $13 in some case, $25 in other cases.
Yeah, so part of that is because I think casual Commander players don't realize how powerful they are. So it's really only the stronger Commander players who want them. And then also Eternal formats like Modern and Legacy. A lot of those tournaments are now happening online. They're happening in paper less often. And we did get a really good reprint in Modern Horizons 2. That was so awesome. So yeah, a lot of them are $20 for a land is still a lot of money though.
It is. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Like that was my point. It's like it's
better than it was. I mean, Scalding Tarn was $100 for a while, but
really
spending more than $1 on a piece of cardboard is dumb.
Hey.
But we've just had to come to accept that at this point.
Hey. Paperboard.
Yeah, it's not thick enough to justify calling it cardboard.
It's not cardboard.
That's right.
It's Domino's pizza tastes like cardboard. It doesn't taste like Magic cards.
Yeah, Domino's pizza doesn't curl. You're right.
Thank you.
Yeah, right. In general, I do prefer very specific cards. Like I don't like a recent example, Shieldred the Apocalypse. That card shouldn't exist because it's just too generically strong. It just goes in too many decks. And that's part of why it's $60. So in general, I'd rather something just be specific. Like in 90% of decks, it sucks, but then in 10% of decks, it's one of the best cards, you know. In general, I prefer that kind of design, but there are situations where it's interesting. Like, I know people don't really like this card, but I think it's the most famous example of what I want to say, Atraxa. Atraxa, there's a million ways you could build Atraxa, right? My Atraxa deck is an energy counter deck. Why the hell would you do that? Well, I did it because it's fun. But you could take Atraxa in all sorts of ways. 1/1 counters. You could do Infect. You could do loyalty abilities like Planeswalkers. Like there's so many ways to take it. And we just don't get commanders like that anymore, which I think you could make the argument that maybe that's for the best. Maybe it's better that we have these narrow commanders, but I am getting really bored of seeing just a bunch of commanders that say, do the thing, get a mana, or do the thing, draw a card. Like, that's probably good for new players, because then they're like, oh, okay, I obviously know what this deck is trying to do. And then it's going to let the new player keep cycling through their deck and keep playing the game, which keeps them from falling behind. So I get it. But I think personally, I've just become bored of seeing that.
There's not a lot, to me anyways, there's not a lot of replayability in the commanders most of the time. Like, I will play a commander from the Precon and I'll play it once, and most of the time I just don't even want to, I don't care if I pick it up ever again. Now I will say Commodore Guff and Elevere.
Yes.
Those two I had a lot of fun playing. And you can say I had fun playing Commodore Guff because I won that game, but I had a lot of fun playing Elevere too. Even though it was just me and my lonely Sun Titan, my massive, huge, gigantic beast behemoth Sun Titan.
Yeah, Sun Titan was definitely your MVP. That was like your saving grace for that game.
He was beefy boy.
Yeah.
But in the past, this is what I said in End Step. I don't buy the Precons. They just never interest me, and it's because every time that I see one, it's like, okay, yeah, I'd have fun with that deck once.
Right.
I would have fun with it one time.
So that is a great segue into our kind of last question subtopic, which is, are they fun? We have played in the last year way more Precons than normal. Now, part of that is because they've been making a lot more Precons than normal in the last 2 years, 3 years.
And we've been sent a couple.
Exactly. We have done 4 episodes or so, and we're going to be doing at least one more. We're going to be doing one for Ixalan, where we're playing with Precon. So we've been playing them a lot more often. So I feel like we... and I bought a couple other ones last year. I got both the Urza and the Mishra Precon last year, and did like a kind of gameplay with them. So we, at least in our recent memory, what do we actually think about them being fun? Because I think at the end of the day, we could say, hey, the land base should be better. We can say there should be more reprint value, because some of them actually do have good reprint value. Some better than others, like the Commander Masters ones were meh. But the average Precon has decent reprint value. What matters at the end of the day is that they're fun to play. Because if you pick it up and it doesn't matter how much you spent on it if you're not enjoying it or wanting to play it again. So what do we think about that part of it? Are we having fun with Precons the way we used to, or are there too many of them? or what do you guys think?
Both. I think that there are too many Precons out there, but all the Precons that I've played, I've had fun with. But I feel like they've kind of been main set Precons. Like they weren't really like the side piece Precons. I mean, I guess the ones from Wilds of Eldraine kind of were, because there was only 2 of them. But maybe that's just a sign that those types of Precons are getting better. I had a lot of fun playing that deck, and I'm excited for the next time that I get to play it. Even the Warhammer Precon, I enjoyed playing that. It was slow, and I would have loved to have changed it. You had a very slow game. Yeah, I would have loved to have changed the deck so that I could actually play faster. But,
right.
I mean, it was still fun. It's just so slow. And that kind of takes away from it for me. I guess like if it's the first time I'm playing a deck and I don't really know what it is, and it's just a slow game and I'm not doing anything, I'm going to get bored pretty quick. But I mean, I won that game, so it was a good time.
Well, and I don't know if we fully said this earlier when this came up, but part of why we had those, where our Precon oriented episodes might have been long, is just because people were like, not knowing what they were doing because they were playing with a deck they hadn't really played with before, and they didn't put their own personal touch to it and whatnot. So that might be part of it.
They're definitely better than they used to be. There's still a lot of improvement, though, I think. Also, I do tend to think the ones with the 4 commander sets overall tend to be better than the 2-set ones.
I agree mostly, yeah.
I mean, there are obviously examples of where that's not the case, but overall, I think when you have a full 4 to play with, they're better built around being pretty close to each other usually. Mm-hmm. So that tends to make the games more fun. Like that, the Commander Masters one is probably the most fun I've ever had playing with the Precon deck.
Yeah, that was such a fun game.
I have to say, it was the same for me. And I pulled up a list of like all the Precons that have come out, and I'm looking at this, and I honestly think that Commander 2016 might have been the best Commander year that we've ever had.
Who are the commanders for those?
So, we just don't see commanders like this anymore. And I don't think any one of these, except one, maybe 2. All right, maybe it's a little bit more broken than I thought. But I don't know.
Well, who are they? Oh, yeah.
Yidris is really good, and you can build Yidris in a really good competitive way. You could build Yidris in a really casual way. I've seen both.
My Yidris deck is Chaos.
I've seen a silly Yidris deck.
Yeah.
That's you, Morgan. I've seen your Yidris deck.
Yeah. Watch
Saskia.
me mediocrely play it on episode 15.
Saskia, the Unyielding. I want more commanders like this, where like you enter and you get to choose like another player, and whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, any player, it deals that much damage to the chosen player. So you can like double stack your damage on somebody, split your damage. Well, not split it, but you know what I mean. But don't see stuff like that. I never know how to pronounce this. Kineas and Tiro.
The group hug one?
The Gay Kings.
Man, I am so glad you don't know how to pronounce that, because me neither. I love that card though. It's in my Kenrith group hug deck. It's a fun one.
And then the other 2 from that year were Atraxa and Brea.
Yeah, which we know those are broken. Yeah. So I guess my last. Let me know if you guys have any closing thoughts on the discussion. But my last note is also, if there's a precon that you're curious about, wait. Because a lot of the time, not always, but a lot of the time, if you wait like 6 months or something, you can find precons on sale at Card Kingdom, TCG Player, maybe even your local game store. You can probably find precons cheaper than the $40, $45 that they were originally selling for. So if there's especially if you're like on the fence, like you're like, I think I would like that precon, but I'm not sure. Just wait. That's my last thought on the topic.
Most of the ones that come from the sets where there's only 2, almost all of them drop between $20 and $30 after a few months. Almost all of them. It's very rare for that not to be the case.
Yeah.
To all the newer Magic players who are either just getting into the game or just getting into Commander, play the precons. The precons are actually a really good way to get introduced to the format. I hope that we have not made any of you feel like I don't ever want to play a precon, because they're fun.
I've definitely played precons that I've liked.
You'll have a good time with it. And also, I think, especially now, compared to where precons used to be, I think that getting a precon is going to be really good for new players when it comes to building a new deck. Not even necessarily using pieces from that for another deck, but they can see how the deck is constructed. They can go through it and be like, okay, here's all these creatures. Here's how they all synergize with the commander and what the deck wants to do. Here's all my instant sorceries.
Teach you the basics on deck building.
Exactly. And I think now more than ever in Commander precon history, now is the best time to actually see maybe I can improve my deck building by analyzing this precon, especially if you're new.
So do you guys think that those like intro Commander decks that they made earlier this year, I think that was this year, do you think those are even worth having around? Or do you think it would be better to just they go pick up one of the normal ones?
I don't think we need them, but I also don't think they hurt.
Yeah.
I mean, I do think they're the clearest thing to hand a new person and be like, here, if you are going to like this game, this is a good way to find that out.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fair.
I don't think that they're necessary. I wouldn't say that they hurt, but I don't really think that they're that helpful either. Because to me, if you're getting into Commander for the first time and you've played Magic before, you don't necessarily need an intro to Commander precon. You could probably pick up a regular precon and kind of figure it out as it goes. Well, and then if you're a new player to Magic and you've never played Magic before and you're starting with Commander, you're not learning how to play Commander first anyways. You're learning how to play Magic first. You have to learn what Exactly. So I don't think that the intro decks are necessary for that, because once you've learned how to play Magic, you should be ready to pick up an average, like regular release Precon and pilot it somewhat effectively.
Because the average one's not that complex.
No,
there are a couple,
means.
But yeah, for the most part, they're not that crazy. And
like,
I'm glad you mentioned that, because I still believe that Commander is a terrible way to learn how to play Magic. Like,
for sure. It's awful.
I did a video recently that'll come out a little bit before this video where I'm talking about how I got into Magic. Man, if people tried to teach me how to play Magic with Commander, I would not have learned how to play Magic. It's just so overwhelming. Like I'm leading up to MagicCon Vegas, my wife's going with me, and I was telling her, I was like, yeah, I mean, if we can work you up to it, I mean, eventually, like, the most common way to play Magic right now is Commander. So that's the multiplayer format. And she is like terrified of the thought of that. She's like, what? I have to pay attention to not just you and my opponent, but also to other opponents. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know why. I don't know why this is the famous way to play, the popular way to play Magic. I don't know. It's really overwhelming. I think it's a terrible way to teach new players. So I agree. I don't think the intro decks or whatever they're called, beginner decks, whatever they call them, I don't think those are necessary. Though I would think it would be cool if we went back to having at least a couple $20 precons. That was nice.
I think the biggest thing that's good about that is, like, there are a bunch of people who don't play Magic. Their friends do, but their friends only play Commander. So that is a good option for them, and that is a very common occurrence if you look online. Really? They're like, I've never played Magic, my friends all play it, but they only play Commander. So if I'm going to spend any money, I'm going to buy something Commander. So let me get the $20 one. That's so common occurrence. I think that's a valid reason to have stuff like that.
That's fair.
I think that's a different situation, though, because if you have a group of friends that plays Commander, you can go out and get a regular Precon, and they can. I have more than enough faith in the Magic community that these people would help their friend learn how to play their Commander deck that they just bought. Whether it's an intro deck or not, I find it really hard to believe that the people in that group would refuse or not be able to help them learn how to play this deck.
It's more casual, number one, and it's if you're getting your friends together to play, because we used to host a Thursday night Magic thing when I was in high school, and it was before we were playing Commander, and it was fun. I mean, we would do like 1v1, and we would do like brackets, and I would have like a prize pool. It was fun, but like
I would hang out with one friend at a time.
Yeah, you would hang out with one person, and while you're shuffling, you'd be like, "So, how was your week?" And then you'd win or lose. You'd go to the next person, and so that's why Commander's more popular. So I get it, but it's very daunting to new players, I'm sure.
Yeah. Start with Modern.
I love Modern. I'm playing in a Modern tournament while I'm in Vegas. I'm really excited.
That's what I started with. That's literally the format I started with.
I love it, man.
I think the best way to teach someone new is actually have them down on Arena. Arena has, I think,
the tutorial on Arena is amazing. Ever. Yeah.
It's so good.
The only problem with Arena is that, and this isn't even really a problem, I'm just... once you get on Arena, you're like, why do I need paper Magic? This is great.
Well, that's why on paper it looks like so many fewer people play Standard now, is because all the Standard players just play Arena now.
Just play Arenas.
Yeah.
They don't need to buy the cards.
So we're at the, I think, 53-minute mark, so we'll want to be wrapping this sucker up. So reminder to the viewers, if you guys have any questions not this episode, but starting next episode in 2 weeks, every other week we'll have a new episode. If you guys have any questions for anyone on the team, you can ask a question specifically to one of us, an overall question. If you have a question for someone else who's a reoccurring person on the channel, if we get the question early enough, we can ask them and then answer it, even if they're not here. So make sure to drop a comment, reach out to us on social media, anything like that. And we have just a couple minutes left. Did anyone have anything cool outside of the world of Magic that they want to say, hey, this is something I've been enjoying recently?
I've been enjoying me some Detroit Lions football.
Heck yeah.
Been enjoying some of that.
Heck yeah. What about you, Preston?
Everyone needs to play Honkai Star Rail.
What's that?
Same people who did Genshin Impact, but it's turn-based.
Okay. Yeah, that's cool. I'm really liking Ahsoka, the new show on Disney.
I haven't watched it yet. No spoilers.
I haven't started it.
I think while we're recording this, it's only half out, but it is pretty good. I've had a very love-hate relationship with Disney Star Wars. Like, some of it's amazing, and like Andor is like the best piece of Star Wars ever made. And then there are things here and there I enjoy, but for the most part, I don't really care for Disney Star Wars. But so far, Ahsoka's pretty good. So that's something outside of Magic that I'm really digging right now. But thank you guys so much for listening. And again, thank you, Jason, for taking up the moniker of the podcast editor. That's going to help us keep more content coming out more often. It's going to let us have these long-term discussions that I've really missed us having. If you have ideas of topics you would like us to talk about, you can also comment that. We have a little bit of a list going. We have 4 or 5 ideas that we're for sure going to do at some point, but we're open to more ideas. And I hope you guys have a great couple days until our next video, and we'll see you later.